The Nazis? Why is it always the Nazis? Darcy exclaimed as she set the table. Jane laughed as she stirred the soup and checked on the grilled cheese sandwiches. What do you mean? The Nazis chased after so many occult and weird things that it's almost become a cliché, Darcy said, folding the napkins. Look at Indiana Jones. Good movies, Eric inserted, browsing through the refrigerator. I think the American project connected with the discovery of this cube is what's interesting, Jane mused, flipping over the sandwiches with a spatula. Something about enhanced humans? I want to hear more about that. Again, you'll have to be patient, Eric advised, turning around with a bottle of beer and shutting the fridge. Yeah, it took almost a week for Nick Fury just to tell you guys where the cube came from in the first place, Darcy reminded her. I know. It's killing me, Jane groaned. I might have to do some of my own research. That's what you're best at, Eric remarked, sitting down at the table. Jane set out 4 red plates on the counter, scooped sandwiches onto each of them, then ladled soup into 4 bowls. She could feel Fenris's eyes on her. Always, always on her. But she acted as swiftly and efficiently as she had learned how over these past few days. She set the plates and bowls down in front of Darcy and Eric, who thanked her, then put her own food down at her place. Then, she picked up the sandwich and soup and spoon, and carried it over to the coffee table near the couch. Fenris, who stood near the corner behind the couch, leaned back against the wall, watched her as she moved. Jane slowed and stopped as she glanced down at the table and saw Fenris's breakfast plate, filled with toast, cereal, and bacon, untouched and cold. She lifted her gaze to him. Pale green eyes met hers. "You're not eating," she said. He gave her a ghost of a smile, his lips white. Then it went away, and he shook his head once. "I don't ask you to feed me." Jane ground her teeth, set the lunch down, and picked up the breakfast plate and set it in the sink. She sat down at the table, picked up her spoon, and began to eat, resuming their earlier discussion about the World War II origins of the glowing blue cube. Feeling Fenris's listening presence behind her, constant and silent, and cold as a shadow. Soft evening light filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow throughout the room. Jane, Darcy, and Eric had pulled deeper, more comfortable chairs into the laboratory area around the table and sat drinking coffee. Jane had a headache. They had been discussing the cube all day for the 9th day in a row, and the possibilities of it all were cracking her skull. Besides which, she missed Thor intensely today. There was a stupid reason. Once, Eric had remarked that Thursday was actually Thor's day, and so every time it came around, Jane found herself unreasonably depressed and could not shake it off. A heavy weight sat inside her chest, and her mind wandered back to days filled with bright blue eyes, a flash of a smile, a ringing laugh, and evenings near a fire, gazing up at the vastness of the stars. Science projects like the current one helped distract her, but now her thoughts were tired, scattered, and she couldn't stand talking about that stupid cube anymore. Eric took a long sip of coffee and leaned back in his chair. Jane pulled her blanket up around her shoulders, tucked her legs under her, and rested her head back on the cushion. She let out a long sigh and regarded her oldest friend. "Tell us about Asgard," she said. Darcy, who had been dozing off in her own chair, perked up and straightened her glasses. Eric chuckled. I'm not exactly an authority. His gaze drifted past them all. Jane glanced back. Fenris sat on the edge of the couch, his elbows braced on his knees, slowly drawing a circle on his right palm with his left forefinger. The cup of coffee Jane had put on the table in front of him sat steaming, and she knew he wouldn't touch it. Jane also knew, by the tilt of his head, he heard every word they said. The heaviness in her heart grew. Fenris had promised to tell her more about what she wished to know, if she left him alone for a few days. It had now been several, and he had barely spoken half a dozen words, let alone anything informative concerning his people or his country, or Thor. He still wore his armor and cape, and remained dust-covered. The only difference about him was he had cleaned the blood off his face, and he looked paler. Eric cleared his throat. Jane turned back to him. He took a deep breath and considered.